I spent 6 years working in America so I could come back to something real. I missed weddings. I missed funerals. I missed my mother getting older. I ate alone, slept alone, worked double shifts in a warehouse while people back home lived their lives without me. All of that was okay, because I had a plan. I had land, my land, registered in my name, something no one could take from me. And then one morning, my phone rang. The person on the other end told me that my land had been fenced off, that strangers had built walls on it, that someone was claiming it belonged to my ex-wife's family now. I thought that was the worst of it. I was wrong, because when I came back to fight for what was mine, I discovered something that hurt far more than losing the land itself. Someone I had trusted completely, someone I had paid every single month to protect that plot while I was gone, had helped them do it. And that was just the beginning. What happened next broke me in ways I am still trying to understand. I still remember the exact moment my life split in two. It was 6:47 in the morning. I know because I looked at my phone the second it rang, and something in my chest dropped before I even saw Rakesh's name on the screen. I had just finished a night shift at the warehouse in New Jersey. My feet hurt. My back hurt. I smelled like sweat and machine oil. I was planning to heat up some leftover rice, sleep for 6 hours, and call my mother. I never made that call. Arjun, you need to come back, or you need to do something, right now. Rakesh's voice was different. I had known this man my whole life. We grew up in the same lane, shared food at each other's houses, fought over cricket matches, cried together at funerals. I knew every version of his voice. The happy one, the tired one, the one he used when he was pretending everything was fine. This voice I had never heard before. What happened? I asked. Silence. Not the silence of bad network. The silence of someone trying to figure out how to say something terrible. They fenced your land. I thought I misheard him. The fan above my bed was loud. The neighbor's TV was on. Someone in the hallway was arguing on their phone. I pressed my phone harder against my ear. Say that again. Arjun, they built a fence around your plot. All 4 sides. There's a new gate. Some men came and said the land belongs to Mira's family now. Mira, my ex-wife. I sat down on the edge of my bed. The mattress sank under me. I remember staring at the small crack in the wall across from me. That crack that I had been meaning to report to the landlord for 3 months. And I just stared at it without seeing it. How? Was all I could say. Rakesh told me everything. It had happened fast, he said. Not slowly, not quietly. Fast and openly. Like they were not afraid of anything. Like they already knew no one would stop them. 3 weeks ago, a truck came with iron rods and cement. Workers arrived the next morning. By the time Rakesh drove past and noticed something was wrong, half the fence was already up. He stopped his bike. He got off. He walked to the workers and told them that the land belonged to someone, that the owner was in America, but would be back, that this was not empty land, that documents existed. One of the workers just looked at him and kept mixing cement. Rakesh said a man came out from behind the newly placed iron gate. Not a worker. Someone older, wearing a white kurta, standing with the kind of calmness that comes from feeling completely untouchable. He looked at Rakesh the way you look at a fly on your food. Who are you? The man asked. I'm the one who looks after this land, Rakesh said. The owner is my cousin. He's in America. He bought this land before his marriage. I have photos. We have papers, the man said quietly. You should leave. And that was it. No argument. No shouting. Just that. We have papers. You should leave. Like the ground beneath Rakesh's feet was already theirs. I want you to understand what that land meant to me. I grew up in a house where we never owned anything. Rented walls, rented floor, rented ceiling. My father worked his entire life and we always lived one bad month away from having to move out. When I was 15, our landlord raised the rent and my father had to borrow money from relatives to stay. I remember the shame on his face when he came home that evening. He sat at the kitchen table and did not eat dinner. My mother served his plate and left it in front of him and he just sat there with his hands folded, looking at nothing. I told myself that day that I would own something. Something no one could ask me to leave. Something with my name on it that meant I was here. I existed. This small piece of the earth belongs to me. I saved for 7 years before I could buy that plot. 7 years of skipping things, saying no to things, watching people around me buy bikes and phones and go on trips while I kept putting money aside. When I finally registered that land in my name, I sat in the registrar's office and my hands were shaking so badly that the officer asked if I was unwell. I was not unwell. I was happy in a way I had never been before. That was the land Mira's family had now fenced off and claimed as their own. Mira and I had separated 2 years before I left for America. I will not go into everything that happened between us. Marriage is complicated. People are complicated. I do not want to say she was evil or that I was perfect, because neither of those things is fully true. But I will say this. When we separated, we agreed on certain things. What was mine stayed mine. What was hers stayed hers. The land was mine. It was registered in my name before we even met. She knew this. Her family knew this. Or I thought they knew this. I found out later, through Rakesh and through others who slowly started calling me once the news spread in our town, that things had been moving for a long time before I even got that call. Documents had been prepared. Signatures had been gathered. Someone had done paperwork. Someone with knowledge and patience and connections had built a case, quietly, while I was 10,000 kilometers away, lifting boxes in a warehouse and sending money home every month. I felt sick. Not the kind of sick that passes. The kind that sits in your stomach for days and makes everything taste wrong. I went to work the next evening because I had no choice. I stood at my station and moved things from one place to another for 8 hours. My supervisor asked me twice if I was okay. I said yes both times. I was not okay. I kept thinking about my father's face at that kitchen table, that look of a man who had no ground under his feet. I had spent my whole adult life trying to make sure I never looked like that. And now I was standing in a warehouse in New Jersey, while strangers with cement and iron rods were erasing the only thing I had ever truly owned. Rakesh kept sending photos. At first I told him to stop. Then I told him to keep sending them, because I needed to see it. I needed to look at what was happening. There was a new gate, painted green, with a lock on it. Through the gate, you could see the plot, my plot, already cleared of the small trees I had planted along the boundary. The trees were gone. The stones I had placed at the corners to mark the edges were gone. Even the small cement marker with my name that the registrar had placed on the day of registration was gone. They had erased everything. It was like I had never been there. It was like I had never existed. And for a long time, sitting alone in that small rented room in New Jersey, I started to wonder if maybe they were right. Maybe this is what happens when you leave. Maybe this is what happens when you are not there to stand on your own ground. Maybe absence is just another word for surrender. I did not sleep that night, or the next night. I called Rakesh every few hours. I looked up lawyers online. I read forums where other people posted about land disputes and property fraud and what to do when someone claims your registered land. I read every comment, every reply, every angry response from people who had been through something similar. But mostly I just sat there, thinking about going back, thinking about what I would find when I did. I had no idea it would be so much worse than I imagined. I booked my flight 3 days after that call. I did not tell anyone except Rakesh. Not my mother. Not my friends back home. Not my colleagues at the warehouse. I just went to my supervisor, told him there was a family emergency, and asked for 2 weeks off. He looked at my face and did not ask any questions. He just said, okay. I packed one bag. I had lived in America for 6 years and I packed one bag the same way I had arrived. That felt like something, though I could not explain what. On the flight, I could not sleep. I tried. I put on headphones, closed my eyes, leaned my head against the cold window. But every time I got close to sleep, I saw that green gate, that lock, that cleared ground where my trees used to be. I would open my eyes and stare at the seat in front of me until the feeling passed. I had imagined coming home differently many times. Every person who works abroad imagines it. You think about the smell of your mother's cooking. You think about tea in the morning with real milk. You think about people who know your name without you having to introduce yourself. You think about sleeping in a familiar bed and hearing familiar sounds and feeling like yourself again, fully, for the first time in years. I landed in Mumbai at 5 in the morning and took a connecting flight to Nagpur, then a bus, then an auto rickshaw. By the time I reached my hometown, it was almost evening, and the light was that orange color that happens just before sunset, the kind that makes everything look peaceful, even when nothing is. Rakesh was waiting for me outside the bus stand. He looked older. I probably did too. We did not say much. We just looked at each other for a moment, and then he picked up my bag and said, "Come, I'll take you." "To the land?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "You should see it before we do anything else. You should see it with your own eyes. Nothing prepares you for seeing your own property taken from you." I had seen the photos. I had looked at them so many times on my phone that I thought I knew what to expect. I thought I was ready. I thought the photos had already done the worst of it. They had not. When Rakesh stopped his bike on the road in front of my plot, I just stood there for a long time without saying anything. The fence was solid. Iron poles every 2 meters, cemented deep into the ground. Thick wire mesh between them. The green gate was heavy and wide, the kind that vehicles could pass through. And behind the gate, behind that locked green metal, I could see walls. Not a fence, not temporary structures. Walls, brick and mortar. Someone had already started building inside my land. How long? I asked Rakesh. The construction started about 3 months ago, he said. It went fast. They had many workers. 3 months. While I was filling shipping orders in New Jersey, someone was laying bricks on my land. While I was eating from a lunchbox at my station, someone was mixing concrete on the ground I had spent 7 years saving to buy. I walked to the gate and put my hand on it. The metal was warm from the day's sun. I could hear something on the other side. Movement. Maybe workers. Maybe someone living there already. I do not know why, but that sound, that ordinary sound of life happening on the other side of my gate, was the thing that finally broke something open in me. I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. I did not stand there and cry like it happens in films. What I felt was something quieter and heavier than crying. It was the feeling of a person realizing that the world does not care how hard you worked. It does not care what sacrifices you made. It does not care that you ate cheap food and wore cheap clothes and sent money home every month and missed every festival and every birthday and every small ordinary moment of life with the people you loved, all so that you could build something real. The world does not keep score. Other people do not keep score. And some people will simply look at what you built and decide it is theirs now, while you were not looking. The next morning I went to see my mother. She lives about 20 minutes from where I stay, in the house where I grew up. She is 61 years old, and her knees hurt, and she still wakes up at 5 every morning because 50 years of habit does not change. When I walked in, she was in the kitchen. She heard me and came out, and she held my face in both her hands the way she used to when I was a boy, and she said, "You lost weight." Not hello, not I missed you. Just, you lost weight. Mothers. I sat down and she made tea and we talked for a while about normal things. Her health, my aunt's daughter's wedding, the price of vegetables. I waited. She waited. We were both waiting for the other one to bring it up. Finally, I said, "You knew about the land." She was quiet for a moment. She looked at her cup. "Rakesh told me," she said. "When?" "Some months ago." I looked at her. "And you didn't tell me? What would you have done from there?" she said. Her voice was not defensive. It was just tired. The voice of a woman who has spent her life trying to protect people from things she cannot actually protect them from. "I didn't want you to worry. I thought maybe it would resolve on its own." It would not resolve on its own. These things never do. But I did not say that to her. I just nodded and drank my tea and looked at the same wall I had stared at as a child, the same faded blue paint, the same small calendar from a shop that closed 12 years ago that she had never taken down because my father had put it there. I thought about telling her everything I was feeling, the anger, the helplessness, the particular kind of loneliness that comes from being far away when something goes wrong and feeling like everyone around you made decisions about your life without asking you. But she looked tired and old. And the light in the kitchen was very gentle that morning, so I said nothing. I went to a lawyer that same week, a man named Verghese, who worked from a small office near the district court. Rakesh had found him. He had a reputation for property cases. I brought my documents, original sale deed, registration papers, survey records. I had kept everything, scanned and backed up in 3 different places because my father always said, "Keep your papers safe, Arjun. The world runs on papers." Verghese looked at everything carefully. He did not rush. He read slowly, made notes, asked me specific questions about the dates, about my marriage, about the separation, about whether any property had been mentioned in the separation proceedings. "It was not a court divorce," I told him. "We just separated. Mutually. There were no proceedings." He looked at me over his reading glasses. "That is the problem," he said. He explained slowly, in simple words, what had likely happened. In the absence of a formal legal separation, certain claims can be made, certain documents can be prepared, signatures gathered from people who may or may not understand what they are signing. He said he needed to see what papers Mira's family had filed. He said it would take time to get those details. He said property cases in this district moved slowly. "How slowly?" I asked. He looked at me the way doctors look at you when they do not want to say the number out loud. These things take time, he said. But you have a strong case. The original registration is clear. The land was yours before the marriage. That matters. I nodded. I wanted to feel relieved. I tried to feel relieved. But when I walked out of his office into the hot afternoon and stood on the street with people moving around me and auto rickshaws honking and a man selling sugarcane juice on the corner, I just felt very small. I had worked 6 years in a foreign country. I had given up things I cannot even fully explain. I had been lonely in ways that people who have never lived abroad cannot understand. That particular loneliness of being surrounded by people but belonging to none of them, of celebrating Diwali alone in a rented room with a phone call home, of not being there when your father got sick, not being there when your cousin got married, not being there for the ordinary days that add up to a life. I had done all of that to build something real, and now I was standing on a street in my own hometown, 36 years old, with a lawyer telling me to be patient while strangers lived inside my gate. That evening, I went back to the plot. I stood outside the fence for a long time. The lights were on inside. Someone was cooking. I could smell it. Someone was cooking dinner in my land. I turned around and walked back to where I was staying. I did not look back. The first person to tell me the full truth was not my lawyer. It was not Rakesh. It was not my mother. It was not any of the neighbors who would stop me on the road and say, "Arjun, we heard. Very bad, very sad," before going back to their lives. It was a woman named Sulachana. She was 63 years old. She lived 2 lanes from my plot, and she had known my family since before I was born. She used to give us raw mangoes from her tree when we were children. She was the kind of person who knew everything about everyone, but only spoke when it mattered. She called me on a Tuesday evening. She said she had been thinking about whether to call for several days. She said she was calling because she felt it was not right for me to be fighting in the dark. "Come and meet me," she said. "Not on the phone. Come." I went the next morning. She made me sit down, and she made tea, and she did not start talking immediately. She arranged the cups carefully. She wiped the table with a cloth. She sat down across from me and looked at me for a moment, with the kind of look that means whatever comes next will not be easy. "How much do you know?" she asked. "I know they fenced the land," I said. "I know construction has started. My lawyer is looking into what papers they filed." She nodded slowly. "What do you know about how it started?" she asked. "Not the fence, before the fence. How it began." I told her I did not know. I assumed Mira's family had decided to take advantage of my absence. I assumed greed. I assumed opportunism. Sulachana looked at the table for a moment. "Arjun," she said, "someone from your side helped them." The room was very quiet. "What do you mean?" I said. She told me. It took me a long time to process what Sulachana said that morning. I am still not fully done processing it, even now, even as I write this. What she told me was this. About 2 years ago, roughly a year before the fence went up, Mira's brother had come to our neighborhood asking questions. Not aggressive questions, friendly questions. The kind of questions that seem harmless when each one is asked separately, but when you put them all together, you realize someone was building something. He was asking about the land, who had the documents, whether Arjun had given anyone power of attorney before leaving, whether the land had ever been disputed, whether any family members had claim to it. Normal people answered because they thought it was normal conversation. They did not realize what was being assembled from their answers. But here is the part that Sulachana said she needed me to know. The part she had been deciding whether to say. One of the people who had spoken to Mira's brother, who had answered questions, who had perhaps said more than they should have, was someone from my own family. She did not tell me the name directly. She spoke carefully, the way people speak when they want to tell you the truth, but do not want to be responsible for what you do with it. But from everything she said, from the details and the timeline and the things she described, I knew who it was by the time I walked out of her house. It was someone I had trusted completely. Someone I had paid every month to look after my land. Someone whose voice on the phone I had believed every single time he told me everything was fine. I did not go to Rakesh immediately. I walked for a long time. I do not know how far. I just walked through streets I had known my whole life, past the school where I had studied, past the temple where my mother took me every Saturday morning as a child, past the chai stall where my father used to stop on his way home from work. I walked, and I thought, and I tried to understand. Rakesh, my cousin, the person I had trusted like a brother, the person I had paid month after month, the person who had called me that morning with that voice I had never heard before and told me the fence was up. Had he known before he called me? Had he watched it happen? Had he been part of planning it? Or had he been used somehow? Had he answered questions without knowing where those answers were going? I did not know. I still do not know completely. The full truth of what happened between Rakesh and Mira's family is something I have not been able to fully confirm, because there are pieces that people will not say directly, and documents that have not surfaced, and conversations that happened in rooms I was not in. But I know this: Rakesh knew more than he told me, for longer than he admitted. And whether that makes him a betrayer or just a weak man who said the wrong things to the wrong people, the result was the same. My land was gone, and someone I loved had helped make that happen. I confronted him 4 days later. I went to his house in the evening. He was sitting outside drinking tea. He saw me coming and something moved across his face. Not guilt exactly. Something more complicated. Something that looked like a man who had been waiting for a conversation and dreading it at the same time. I sat down next to him. I did not shout. I was not planning to shout. "Tell me what happened," I said. "All of it. From the beginning." He was quiet for a long time. Then he told me. It started small, the way these things always do. Mira's brother had come to him. They had spoken. Rakesh had answered some questions. He said he did not know what the questions were for at first. He said by the time he understood, he was already too deep in, that he had already said things that could not be unsaid. Then Mira's brother had offered him money. Not a large amount. A small amount. The kind that feels meaningful to someone who is struggling. Rakesh had debt. I knew this. I had lent him money twice in the years before I left. He had debt, and someone had offered him money and he had made a choice. He gave them information, survey details, boundary measurements. He helped them understand exactly what the plot looked like, where the corners were, what documents would need to be countered. He told them about my separation from Mira, and that there had been no court proceedings. He may have done more than that. He would not tell me everything. I listened to all of this without saying anything. When he finished, he looked at me. His eyes were wet. He started to say something about how sorry he was, how he had not known it would go this far, how he had thought it was just information and not. "Stop," I said. He stopped. I looked at him for a long time. This man I had grown up with. This man I had shared food with, cried with, trusted with the only real thing I owned. "How much?" I asked. He told me the amount. I stood up. I picked up my phone from the table between us. I looked at him one more time. The amount he had been paid to help take my land was less than what I earned in 2 weeks at the warehouse in New Jersey. That night, I could not stay where I was. I went for a walk and ended up sitting on a bench near the bus stand, the same bench where I had sat the evening before I left for America 6 years ago. I had sat there then with one suitcase, waiting for the overnight bus to Mumbai, telling myself that everything would be different when I came back, that all the sacrifice would mean something, that I would come back to something solid. I thought about those 6 years, every early morning shift, every meal eaten alone, every time someone at work made a comment about my accent and I just smiled and said nothing because I needed the job. Every Diwali and Holi and birthday spent looking at my phone while people back home sent photos of celebrations I was not part of. Every time someone asked me when I was going to settle down, and I said soon, soon, once I have enough saved. I had given 6 years of my life to build something, and the people I had trusted most had helped someone else take it. I sat on that bench for a long time. The bus stand slowly emptied out. The tea stall across the road turned off its lights. Dogs settled down on the pavement. The night became very quiet. I thought about my father at that kitchen table, that look of a man with no ground under him. I had spent my whole life running from that look. I was starting to think it had followed me all this way, changed from that day. But that is not how it happened. What actually happened was smaller than that, and in some ways, more real. It was a Sunday morning, about 3 weeks after I had come back. I was sitting outside where I was staying, drinking tea alone, watching the street wake up slowly. A man was opening his shop across the road. A woman was sweeping her doorstep. 2 children in school uniforms were arguing over something while their mother told them to stop. An auto rickshaw went past with a song playing too loud for that hour. Just life. Just ordinary life happening all around me. And I thought, I am still here. 6 years in a foreign country did not erase me. Rakesh's betrayal did not erase me. Mira's family putting a green gate on my land did not erase me. I was sitting here drinking tea, watching a street I had known my whole life, and I was still here. That sounds simple. It was simple. But sometimes simple is the only thing that keeps you moving. I finished my tea, went inside, and called Verghese. The The case moved slowly. I want to be honest about that, because I think when people tell stories about fighting back, they make it sound cleaner than it is. They make it sound like justice has a rhythm, like once you decide to fight, things start falling into place. That has not fully been my experience. What actually happened was paperwork. A lot of it. Verghese filed for an injunction to stop further construction. That took time. There were hearings, adjournments, dates that got pushed forward, a process that felt designed to exhaust people into giving up. I started to understand why people give up, not because they are weak, but because the system is heavy and slow, and most people do not have the money or the time or the emotional strength to keep pushing against something that heavy for months without seeing results. I almost gave up twice. The first time was about 6 weeks in, when Verghese called me and said the other side had submitted documents claiming that the land had been transferred to Mira as part of an unregistered family settlement. The documents had signatures. Some of those signatures were from people I knew, people from my own neighborhood, people who had sat with my father at weddings and funerals. I asked Verghese if the documents were real. He said the signatures might be real, but the settlement they described was not. He said people sometimes signed things without fully reading them. He said this was common in property fraud cases. He said it was serious, but it was not the end. But that evening, sitting alone, I thought about those signatures. People I knew, people who had perhaps not meant harm but had allowed themselves to be used. And I thought about Rakesh, and about my mother who had known for months and said nothing, and about all the ways the people closest to you can let you down without even meaning to, simply because they are human and humans are complicated and nobody is fully on your side all the time. That night I thought about withdrawing the case, going back to America, starting over somewhere, forgetting the land, forgetting all of it. I did not sleep. By morning I had not made a decision, but I had made tea, and I had called Verghese, and I had told him to keep going. The second time I almost gave up was after I met Mira. I had not planned to meet her. It happened because I went to the district court for a hearing, and she was there with her family. We had not seen each other in over 3 years. She looked different, older, like me, quieter than I remembered. Her family surrounded her like a wall. Her brother, the one who had spoken to Rakesh, stood slightly in front of her with his arms crossed. He looked at me the way you look at a problem you are confident you have already solved. Mira and I made eye contact for just a moment. I do not know what I expected to see in her face. Guilt, maybe, or defiance, or the cold blankness of someone who has decided you are the enemy. What I saw was something I was not prepared for. She looked tired and sad, and like someone who was also caught in something larger than herself. I do not say this to excuse what happened. The land is mine. The documents are mine. What was done was wrong, and I will not pretend otherwise. But that one moment, that brief look, reminded me that there is almost always a version of events that is more complicated than the simple story of villain and victim. I think her brother and her family pushed this. I think she may have been told things that were not fully true. I think she may have signed things without understanding all of what she was signing. I think there are people in her family who used her the same way those same people used Rakesh, offering small pieces of security to people who were struggling, in exchange for things that cost those people far more than they realized. I do not fully forgive, but I understand a little more than I did. After the hearing, walking back to where Rakesh's bike was parked, I was very quiet. He still drove me places. We had not repaired what was broken between us. We had not even really spoken about it again after that one evening. But he was still there, still showing up, and I did not know what to do with that either. The injunction came through 4 months after I filed. Construction on my plot was ordered to stop. The court acknowledged my original documents and scheduled a full hearing on the ownership claim. Verghese called me when the order came through. He was calm about it, the way lawyers are calm about things that feel enormous to everyone else. He said it was a good development. He said it meant the court had taken the documentation seriously. He said there was still a long road ahead. I went to the plot that evening. The green gate was still there. The fence was still there. The partially built walls behind the gate were still there. But there were no workers, no sounds of construction, no trucks, just the gate and the fence and the silence. I stood there for a long time. I put my hand on the fence the same way I had the first evening I came back, when everything felt hopeless and heavy and like the world had moved on without me. It felt different this time, not because the land was back. It was not back yet. Not because I had won. I had not won yet. But because I had not stopped. Because every morning for 4 months, I had woken up in a town that held more pain for me than comfort. And I had kept going. I had drunk my tea and called my lawyer and filled out forms and sat in waiting rooms and answered questions and done the next small thing, and then the next, and then the next. My father never owned anything. He sat at that kitchen table with his hands folded and looked at nothing. I used to think that was weakness. I was young, and I did not understand yet how hard it is to keep going when the ground keeps disappearing under you. Now I think he was doing exactly what I was doing, the next small thing, and then the next. I am still in India as I write this. The case is still moving through the court. Verghese says we are in a strong position. He says the original registration documents are clear, and that the unregistered settlement the other side submitted has serious problems. He says he is confident. I am trying to be confident too. I extended my leave from the warehouse. They have been patient with me. My supervisor, a quiet man from Pennsylvania who never asks too many questions, told me to take whatever time I need. I do not know if I will go back to America when this is over. I do not know what comes after this. I have not thought that far ahead. What I know is this. Rakesh and I are not what we were. Maybe we never will be. But he came to my mother's house last week and sat down and drank tea with me. And we did not talk about the land or the betrayal or any of it. We talked about a cricket match. We talked about his daughter who is learning to read. We sat like two people who share a history that is too complicated to throw away, but too damaged to pretend is fine. I do not know what that is. I do not have a word for it. My mother made extra food when I was there. She kept putting things on my plate without asking. At one point she said, out of nowhere, I should have told you sooner. Just that. Nothing more. She did not apologize elaborately or explain herself. She just said it and looked at her plate. I said, it's okay. I am not sure it was fully okay. But she is my mother and she is 61 and her knees hurt. And she has been carrying her own guilt about this for months. I did not need to make it heavier. I go to the plot sometimes in the evening. I stand outside the fence. The construction is stopped, but whoever is living or staying inside is still there. I can still sometimes smell cooking from the other side of that green gate. I do not know exactly when this will end. I do not know exactly what I will find when I finally open that gate myself. The walls they built are already there. The ground has been disturbed. Things were planted and removed. The land I return to will not look exactly like the land I left, but it will be mine. I know this the way I knew it when my hands were shaking at the registrar's office all those years ago. Not because a paper says so, though the paper does say so, but because I worked for it in ways that no one can undo. 7 years of saying no to things. 6 years in a country that was never fully mine. Every skipped meal and lonely night and missed celebration. Nobody can take that from me. They can fence the land. They can build walls on it. They can put a green gate with a lock and stand behind it with their arms crossed in their confidence. But they cannot take the fact that I earned it. And they cannot take the fact that I came back. I came back, and I am still here. That, for now, is enough.